I'm Shane Metcalf. I'm the co-founder and chief culture officer of 15Five. Today, we're going to be going deep into conversations about how do you actually create a curiosity-based company that truly elicits greatness from your people. We get to explore the shadow of our own leadership styles, why we need to be treating business as a mythological hero's journey so that we can actually engage our full potential and fulfill our destiny as business people, and more importantly, as human beings on a path of evolution.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? What would happen if you stopped and laid claim to that the evolution of your growth is best catalyzed in the ashes of chaos and devastation? You've thought about that? Well, stay tuned, because that's where we're going on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I am the Dragonist, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes absolutely everything by transforming meaning into action. To find out more about me, you can simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by the Dragon's Lair. Have you discovered your next evolution? Imagine being in a virtual classroom where I personally walk you through live trainings where I will reveal the techniques and strategies that I previously only offered to top CEOs, C-suite executives, high-level entrepreneurs, athletes, and entertainers. And then being able to access those trainings and the exclusive workbooks on demand. Well, that's what many of our listeners have begun to do, because they're discovering that you have that opportunity. Just simply go over to patreon.com/Dov Baron. That's www.patreon.com/Dov Baron. In just 2 minutes, you can join us. In fact, you'll even get access to all past episodes on subjects like ethical persuasion, becoming a meaning-driven leader, resilient leadership in a time of chaos, and so much more. Again, patreon.com/Dov Baron, and secure your seat. If you're a new listener, new viewer, strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on all of the usual podcast outlets like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. If you're a regular listener, big thank you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show over time. We are honored to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. In case you haven't noticed, the feces has hit the fan, and most leaders were caught with their pants down. In these times, there's a need to pivot in everything, not just in business, not just even from a business point of view, but more on the challenging side is there needs to be an internal pivot. I'm talking about more than just mindset, but potentially how you see yourself, your position, and more importantly, your corporate culture. How are you going to remotely facilitate a virtual culture? Well, stay tuned, because that's what you're going to discover on today's show. You see, my guest on this episode is the co-founder and chief cultural officer of 15Five. Shane Metcalf is a champion of building healthy cultures that ultimately leave people that have been in them better off. He spent his life studying personal growth and transformation and has applied those learnings into building an unconventional company that helps other organizations achieve high performance by helping their people to become their very best selves. His insights have been featured in Inc., He's Fast Company, Business Insider, Bloomberg, The Washington Post, and TechCrunch. He is the co-founder of the company that's won numerous awards for their company culture, including the prestigious Inc. Best Workplaces to Work award, and has been ranked as the number 3 in the U.S. on Glassdoor. And in case you don't know, Glassdoor is where the people who work for you, they vote on you. So it's a little bit more real. Please put your hands together and help me welcome the co-founder of 15Five, Mr. Shane Metcalf.
Yeah, wow, what an intro, Doug. Okay, thanks so much. Really good to be here. What a time we live in. What a time to be a leader, and what a time to evolve. Because I think that's really what we're being asked in all of our roles. Like you were saying, it's not just mindset shifts. It's not just a slight tweak to our culture. We need to mutate or die is the imperative that's on the table. And so it's like, okay, how are we going to rise to this occasion?
And I definitely want to spend our time together today really talking about that, because I think you're absolutely right. And I think that there's a bunch of people who are going to become dinosaurs because they're going to try to innovate rather than transform. And there's a great deal of difference. But we're going to come to that in a minute, because what we always like to start the show is in the same place, which is in this time of people claiming to be influencers and whatever the title is. My experience is when I speak to great leaders is oftentimes the people who've had the most impact on their lives, the people who've had the most impact on their leadership are sometimes people we know, but most often people we don't know, or people we wouldn't suspect, people we go, okay. So who is somebody who's really impacted you, Shane, really impacted the way that you look at leadership and has maybe transformed that for you? Again, we might not know who that person is.
Yeah, I certainly, my path in business has been unconventional. It's not been a linear, okay, I'm going to school for, my BA in business management, and then I'm going to go to management school. It's been a crazy, circuitous, non-linear path to achieve what I've achieved and to be where I am. And it's like, it's an ongoing process. Yep. But I would say, one of the authors that has deeply influenced my thinking is this guy, Jed McKenna. And he wrote the book, Spiritual Enlightenment, The Damnedest Thing. And it's a book about awakening, about non-dual realization. And it's a trilogy, and it's, in many ways, it's a scathing damnation of the spiritual marketplace. I mean, it's a brutal book. He kind of holds no prisoners. And he has some of the best distinctions of life as a hero's journey that we confuse. Many of what we often think of as enlightenment is actually just the beginning stages of human adulthood. And this has been so powerful for me because it's helped me change the frame of thinking of the world is separate from me, and I'm trying to achieve these things and be successful and create a company that fulfills its mission, and all these people suck because they're in my way or whatever, to seeing it, all of this is my own hero's journey. Every single challenge that I've encountered this year with COVID completely flipping the script, with being confronted with all of the shortcomings of our own company and the places that we need to grow, as this is all just my opportunity to grow and develop and become a more integrated human being who knows who and what they are, and actually leverage the chaos, leverage the challenge as rocket fuel for my own growth and development.
That's really fascinating, because in our work, the work we do with companies, one of the things that I say is that you can look at leadership as a business, and that's fine. You can look at it as something you do in business. What we look at it is a path to enlightenment. Leadership is a path to enlightenment. And every path to enlightenment, you must deal with the demons. You must become the hero. You must come back from the brink. You must enter the dark cave. You must do all of those things. And I think that I really believe that COVID and this whole pandemic and all of it is the greatest gift to that. I mean, I've said on several interviews, which have made me very popular and very unpopular, which is I think that the greatest gift to leadership is Donald Trump. Because whatever side of that line you stand on, if he's not waking you up, you're really in a coma, right? So it doesn't matter what side you line up on. It's like, if you're really, like, if he's bugging you and you just go, oh, this is terrible, and you're bitching, moaning, and complaining, you might as well just have a little nap for another 100 years. Or you can say, this is going to shake us into enlightenment. Like I said, I think there's nobody been better for the women's movement than Donald Trump. But people go, how can you say that? It's really easy. 1 million women showed up the day after he got inaugurated. That's a pretty good unifying thing. We're not always catalyzed, is my point, by good things. We're mostly catalyzed by the bad things. Those are the things that lift us up and say, screw it, I'm not taking it anymore. That moment in the movie where it says, I'm mad as hell and I'm not taking it anymore, is the moment that we're all actually looking for. And I love that you approach leadership from that place rather from let me stroke your ego and let me tell you how wonderful you are. Although that's a part of it, it's not the great catalyst.
Yeah. I mean, look, I look back at January of this year and I think of how naive I was. And this year feels like, oh, this is just the beginning of my journey into true leadership. Like I am nowhere. I am such a young child in the journey of the rest of my life of how much more I have to grow and how much more I have to learn. And the challenge of COVID, and let's be real, this has been the most challenging 6 months of my career. And we had a lot of cultural equity built up. We had a lot of solid foundation for our company, and it still rocked us. It still was a very challenging time. And, we're now emerging on the other side of it stronger than ever. But, whoo, man, those days of deep stress and knowing that this is the fire that is actually purifying and forging me into a real leader. And, leadership is easy when it's all going well.
Sure.
But wow, when you have to make those tough decisions and you have to know that it's not going to make everybody happy.
No, exactly.
And you can still make it, but you still are committed to a higher path. You're still committed to honor, let's say, and not just immediately laying everybody off, because that seems like the simplest thing. And so I really love the idea of bringing back mythology, seeing our lives as a great myth. Because it's all story. We're all just making this shit up anyway. Society and civilization is a great fiction that we've written. Business is a fiction. 15.5 is a fictional piece of paper that we signed with the government, and now we have a company.
Yeah, and
it's all made up.
And it's a story that you tell on a regular basis. Now, I mentioned at the opening that your company, 15.5, has won numerous awards. As I said, that for company culture, including best workplace, etc., being number 3 on Glassdoor. For context, tell our listeners and our viewers, what is 15.5 and why that title?
Okay. So
it's not ABC Inc. It's 15.5. Yeah. What the hell?
And there's a cool backstory to the company. And so at a high level, 15.5 is a people and performance management software platform. And so we provide the infrastructure and the scaffolding for people leaders, so people operations and HR, to create really strong and effective performance management process. And so that means everything from your annual, the old school annual review that we've reinvented, leveraging positive and humanistic psychology that actually understands what are the prime motivators of a human being. So it's almost like we updated the performance management paradigm for the 21st century based on the social science of how do you help human beings thrive. So there's the anchors of the quarterly, biannual, or annual review. And then you have things like the weekly check-in, where it's almost the heartbeat, which is this continuous flow of questions and answers with your team that gives you insight into how are people really doing, what are the challenges they're facing, what's the status of their objectives that they're working on. We have OKRs and goal management tracking. We have insights into your one-on-ones so you can better have more effective conversations with your team. I like to almost think of this also as a manager effectiveness platform. We make your managers instantly better because good managers ask good questions, pay attention to the blockers, and set their team up for success. And we make that really easy. We automate so much of that.
So it's interesting because you've combined this automation technology with part of what's confusing. But I got to ask you, fill us in on a little bit on the backstory.
Okay, so in the late 70s, Yvon Chouinard, founder of Patagonia, and I forget the founder of North Face, but they came up with a management process that they called 515s. And there's actually a really cool 1982 Inc. article about this. And what it is it's the basic idea is that they would have every person in Patagonia fill out answer a couple of questions every single week, I think on Friday. It would take 15 minutes to write, and it would take the manager 5 minutes to review. And then they boil up and you kind of, me as a mid-manager, I'd get the key insights and the nuggets of wins, struggles, morale, insights for my team. And then I'd surface those up to my manager and so on and so forth. And I like to think that, I don't know if this is true, but I like to think Yvon Chouinard is at base camp at Everest and gets these faxed to him. And all of a sudden he has direct insight into what's going on at every single level of the organization. Because in any hierarchy, the further up the hierarchy you are, the less truth you get from the bottom.
Yeah.
And so that is this brilliant way of solving it. So we learned about this 10 years ago. My co-founder, David Hassel, heard about this and thought, wow, this would be a brilliant product. This would give me the insight and superpowers as a business leader to know what the heck is actually happening and increase my influence and ability to support and coach the organization.
And as I said, what I love about it is this combination of humanities with technology. One of the great challenges, and I'll say this very clearly, because I say it to the leaders that I work with. When I'm working with a CEO, I say, what do you know about what's going on in the company that is not on a spreadsheet?
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, blah, blah, blah. And I say, you don't know. And they say, what do you mean I don't know? There's no way you can know. And they go, why? And I say, for a simple reason and I'm going to give you this test. And here's the test. And I'll have all the execs in the room. And I'll say, okay, who's the number one person who answers to you? And they'll tell me the names of each person, right? So I've got the C-suite there, and they're telling me the name of the number one person that answers to them. And I say, okay, what's that person's number one job? And they'll tell me. And we go all the way around, and I go, you all got it wrong. And they go, I think we know what our number one person, what their number one responsibility is. And I go, no, you don't. And they go, okay, what is it? And I said, it's to keep you happy. It's that simple. It's to keep you happy because you pay their check. That's the number one job they have in their head. It's not the number one job you have in your head, but it's the number one job in their head is to keep you happy because you pay the check. And if you don't like what they say, they might not get their check. So they're going to say what is going to make you happy, which is likely to not be the truth. There lies in the problem. And that's what I like about this, is that you're finding a way to filter that through into those upper levels. So just so everybody understands, how does that not get diluted, Shane, in the process of what you guys are doing, so that people are going, oh, if I put that down, they're going to know it's me, and that could have a backlash that means, they're making cutbacks, so I could be gone.
I love it. I one of my secret kind of missions for 15.5, we don't talk about this in our marketing, but what I actually know we do is we increase the truth-telling bandwidth inside of a company. Because just as you said, you are getting lies from your people. Your people are not giving you the hard truth because they're trying to keep you happy. And so if you can increase the amount of truth that, if you can get fiber optic pumped in, that's giving you real insight, real time, bad news, good news, you're going to be able to run a more efficient and effective business. And so, part of, there's a couple of things of how do you not get this watered down. One is if you never ask, you're never going to get the answers. So you have to get good at asking the right questions and again, and then demonstrating that you don't punish people for telling the truth. That's why, as a company, we're moving out of just software and into education and services, because technology is only half the equation. You have to have the human side. You have to train your managers how to receive feedback, how to not punish people when they give you the bad news. But where you need to start is you need to start by asking. And we automate the asking of the questions. But then again, you can also come in and this week, I might think, hey, I want to know what's the worst news in your job right now? And I can ask that question. I could go in right now into my product, ask that question. And on Monday, I'm going to have 200 answers of what's the bad news. And so you have to ask. And then most people assume that they're not going to get the truth. And I think that's actually where a lot of people go wrong. CEOs always tell us, I can't believe how truthful people are. And so you need to build a culture that embraces truth as a path to success.
Yes.
You need to publicly demonstrate the celebration of truth telling and of bad news.
Yep.
And so that because cultures are just kind of rewards and punishments.
Of course.
What do I get rewarded for doing and what do I get punished for doing? And so reward truth telling.
Right. That's interesting because the argument is not unlike the argument that I'll often have around vulnerability, which is you need to train people to be vulnerable, and you do that by demonstrating vulnerability. Okay, but at the same time, the leaders I'm asking to demonstrate it are also have grown up in a culture where vulnerability was punished. So getting the leaders to demonstrate honesty is difficult because they also know that they grew up in a culture where they were punished for honesty. So demonstrating it is believed to be, a potential vulnerability. How do you get the leaders to step into that, Shane? How do you get them? Because you and I have talked about this before, that leadership is by example, and it's not anything else. If you're not going to do it, don't bother. How do you get them to step into it themselves?
Well, and this is again where I love the idea of business as a hero's journey, because there is so much deconditioning we need to do. to become our best selves.
Yeah.
And so in vulnerability and learning to let the world in and not keep so much armor on our internal world is I think a key competency to actually become our best selves.
Yeah.
And so how we've done it at 15.5, and I think this has worked remarkably well, is that with the leadership team at our retreats, and we used to do this in person, but right now we're all virtual, is table questions. And a table question is when you're all sitting around, and we usually do these over meals at the beginning or pretty much every night. And I'll lead a series of questions designed to take us through a bit of an arc of truth telling, of getting real, of revealing what is inside to the outside. And I think I have like a 70% hit rate for one or at least one person crying over these, because we get real. We actually talk about the struggles. And so questions, like if I'll usually do like a 4-question arc around the table. And it's like, what do you most want to know about? What do you most want us to know about you? And then the second question, what do you what do you not want us to know about you? Like, what are you scared of the world knowing about you? And man, that one's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And the willingness of people to rise and summon emotional courage. And part of that is how we hire, right? There needs to be some inkling of desire to grow. I mean, we've had people where this kind of thing is too much and they hit the eject button and they say, whoa, I want my work to be work. I don't want any vulnerability. But we've had very few people do that. And
I know you've got 3 and 4 and I want to go to it, but when you get to that, because I do work around vulnerability and do a lot of asking those deeper questions, and that person wants to eject, and the leader says to you, the CEO says to you, this is my top guy in X who's now want to eject because they want to keep work and life separate. How do you respond to that?
Well, and I might not do that question right away. It's a little bit of an advanced question. Like,
I understand that, but you're going to still get to that. And that person's still going to say, I'm out because I'm not going to do that. It doesn't matter whether it's delivered in the first 5 minutes or the first 15 hours.
Sure. So I'll usually try to have that person as like 4th or 5th on the table. I always pass to my left. So if you're ever at a dinner with me, never sit on my left.
Because you're going
fast. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like everybody in the company is like, don't sit on to the left. Don't shit on Shane's left. Yeah, don't sit on my left. But after you've heard the CEO reveal, heart-wrenching details of their life, after you've heard the CTO and our CMO get real and really go there and say, this is my biggest struggle in life. Or this was the hardest thing about growing up for me, like the hardest struggle of my childhood. And like they just go there and you feel the room drop in and listen. It's amazing how our vulnerability gives permission for other people to be vulnerable. Now, that said, it's all about meeting people where they're at. And so if somebody is like, whoa, I've never like actually revealed my own internal personal struggles to my colleagues, they might start out by saying, well, I haven't been exercising much and that's really hard for me. And that's okay, right? You know, whatever level of vulnerability somebody's willing to lean into, we love them there. We accept them there. We celebrate that in that moment. You know, like when my daughter is crawling and she doesn't quite get it, I'm not like, oh God, she's never going to get this.
No.
It's just like, great. I know it's a process. And we're all, development is I think transformation happens in 2 ways. One is a gradual kind of accumulation of wisdom. And we read 1,000 books and suddenly we just kind of see a little different. But then the second cause is a disorienting dilemma where, COVID hits,
Mm-hmm.
our partner dies,
Mm-hmm.
we break our leg, whatever it is that suddenly flips our world upside down. And so I think that the gradual kind of just marinating in a culture that embraces vulnerability. So that embraces vulnerability, and over time it becomes safe. I mean, I've watched my CRO, Brad McGinnity, what's up, Brad, come in and be very kind of cautious with this stuff at first. And, being like, oh, I don't know. Are we going to get him? Is he going to crack? Is he going to open up to this? And now he's one of the biggest champions of this.
But it's not my point, Shane, because I agree with you, everything you're saying, that, again, reciprocity of vulnerability, leaders have to go first. Don't disagree with any of that, right? Not at all. However, there are old school leaders who are doing very well in a company, who are very good at what they do, who are just saying, I'm not going there. Mm-hmm. Thank you, CEO. Yep. Thank you, CMO. Sure. Thank you, COO, for your vulnerability. I'm not going there. You don't pay me to know about my childhood. You pay me to get this done, and I get it done, and I get it done well. What do you say to the CEO at that point? That's the question.
Yeah, well, it all depends on what your culture is, right? I mean, what's the agreement? What is if you made it explicit that to be a part of this company, you need to be willing to lean into the awkward and the vulnerable and the growth edge, great. Then in that case, you say, hey, look, you get great results, but like you aren't willing to play in the culture that we're creating. And it's going to be uncomfortable for you because we're going to do this every single quarter. And you're going to get flustered and you're going to be like, oh man, I don't belong here. Because in that situation, if you aren't willing to engage, your brain is going to be on a threat mode. And vulnerability is very threatening until you lean into it. And then it's liberating.
Right. So this is the point I want everybody to understand, because you and I are talking it's preaching to the choir here. And it's one of the things that I'm very clear at saying to people is that this is going to be new, potentially, for you as a company, but you have to decide whether it's a cultural shift or whether it's the new clicky thing to do. If it's the new clicky thing to do, don't bother. Don't bother. Yep. I know you've heard me talk about the power of vulnerability and how useful it is. You hear Shane talk about it with 15.5. You've heard Brene Brown talk about it. I've been talking about it for 30 plus years, right? Before it was cool. I was talking about myth and how they apply, okay, now it's cool. That's great. But if it's just a cool thing, don't bother. Please don't bother hiring me. Don't waste your money. Don't waste your time. It has to become cultural. But if it's going to become cultural, then you've got to commit. And committing means, and I say this all the time, committing means that you may lose some of your best people at a production level, but I promise you the other people will pick up that slack enormously because they belong to a culture, and human beings are tribal. We want to belong. We want to connect. And as a company, we have to create community. We have to rehumanize business. I know that you and I are on the same page with all this. How are you looking at building? Because I know we talked about how your company was brought into manifestation. You started out remotely, became less remote, and now you've gone back to remote.
Yeah.
Not you, but all of us. How do you keep that cultural thing alive, that tribe, that sense of belonging, while being remote and guiding others around the same process?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of things that have worked really well for us and that we've been doing the whole time, because we were always a remote first company. Mm-hmm. And now I've just, thank the lucky stars for these, because fully remote, they really hold their water. So I believe that we need to weave in little bits of human connection into the day-to-day process. Mm-hmm. And so that's things like on-ramps to meetings, Every single meeting we have in the company, we do a check-in first. And that's it. That can be just a 3-word check-in. Real quick, what's my internal state? What's on my mind? What do I need to say to get present in this meeting? All right. We have 3 all-hands meetings. Monday and Wednesday, we have a mandatory 30-minute meeting for the whole company. We take the first 5 minutes of that Monday meeting and do a gratitude insight. So I pick some random ass thing to remember that we should be grateful for, like your mother or toilet paper or the internet or shoes, things that we take for granted. And we bring that in, and then we are like, oh yeah, man, I really like my shoes. I love not having to go barefoot out into the city streets. And that can take a whole variety of things, support network. But it gives that moment, it's about retraining our brain to focus on the positive, and especially in this day and age where the negativity bias is so tuned in to only the bad news frequency. And this interrupts that.
Right.
And there's, all the science on gratitude is, really being proven. You make gratitude a habit, you're going to be a happier, more resilient human being. Wednesdays, I have a different employee lead 5 minutes of some weird meditation, and that's up to them. Like my CTO, who's, Ukrainian engineer by training, just is leading it this month. And he's a huge nature fan. And so he's just taking us on these journeys through nature with him for 5 minutes. And then the real kicker, the thing that I think is the cultural anchor, like if I had one practice that I could export to any other company, it's Question Friday. And Question Friday is we hop on a Zoom call for 30 minutes and there's a question master for the month.
The whole company.
This one isn't mandatory, but we get a lot of people join. It used to be everybody, 200 people. Now, it's mixed. But we have a question master for the month, and that person, their only job is to come up with a powerful question. And they ask that question, and then we go into breakout groups of 10 to 20 people. And then we have 60 to 120 seconds each to answer the question. And it's so cool because people go there, and the variety of questions, it ranges from superficial fun to deep, meaningful vulnerability. And every Friday, the company is playing this game. And so we've been doing this for 8 years. And so I don't even know how many questions that is. But you get a chance to tell some of your human story.
Right.
And you get to do it on your terms. You can share as much or as little as you want. But it's magic.
Yeah.
You give people the opportunity to tell their story, and you get to see that person in a new light. You understand our commonalities. You see the struggles, you see the dreams, the moments of transformation that have shaped these professionals where we all have our professional mask on.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to take that off.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fabulous thing. I mean, my whole, as you know, the sign off for this show and the sign off for my work is stay curious, my friend, stay curious. Yeah. Because I think that, as I've said before, questions require answers and somebody ends up being wrong. But curiosity requires understanding, and that just deepens. So I want to create curiosity even more than questions. I want to use questions to develop curiosity, which will create understanding. So it's leveling the questions to go deeper rather than to go to answers.
I love this. And it actually connects some dots for me that haven't been connected before, because I've often, I've kind of marveled that I've built a life, career, and company on questions.
Yeah.
Like my training as a coach. So what I do, I ask questions. My company, we literally build software that asks questions. Question Friday, gratitudes, they're all questions.
Of course.
And so it's just like, wow, questions are the foundation of my life. But I do think that the distinction that you just made, that questions in service of curiosity rather than questions in service of answers, is critical, because that's the difference between, am I going to get punished for telling the truth when I answer in my 15.5, what am I struggling with? Or is that the starting point for a deeper conversation to arrive at a better place?
Well, I'm glad that I could give you that clarity and connect those dots for you. Give me credit. That's great. Because I honestly believe that. I believe that that's why I have my other show, Curiosity Bites, because I believe that curiosity is the cure for the problems of the world. It's not more love. It's not better communication. It's not all the things that we'd like to think it is, because none of those things are possible without curiosity. And curiosity means I want to understand. I had a conversation with somebody this morning who is diametrically opposed to me politically. Diametrically opposed. And I had a wonderful conversation with him, which got quite heated in places. And I have a great respect for him, even though we're diametrically opposed, because I remained curious. And when I went off curiosity and noticed that I'd gone off curiosity, I went into being right. And being right doesn't help. So it was like, hold on a second. This is why. Now, let me go back to this. So help me understand that. Why do you see that? Why do you see that? I'm trying to understand this rather than make you wrong. Okay, that seems incorrect to me, but obviously I'm missing something from your perspective, because we live in a world now, particularly, and we do it as leaders, where things are wrong or right. And the truth is that is not the truth looking back. It's never looking back. People who were supportive of Adolf Hitler were absolutely right in 1939. They were absolutely wrong in 1945. They were absolutely right because it was the general feeling of the nation that that's the way you got to go if you're going to survive in this nation. But by 1945 and the awakening of the end of the Second World War, people were like, what the hell was I thinking? So it's really important that we understand that we're all doing that all day long. You've made decisions about your business and about your leadership that were absolutely right to you at the time. You lied, you just thought it was the truth at the time. And by being curious, you get to discover where you're lying to yourself and you just don't know it yet. That's so powerful. And that's why, that's why when in our initial conversation, I was like, okay, Shane and I have got to have this conversation with other people involved.
Yeah. Well, and think about, if you're lying to yourself, if you're just, hey, I've built my house on being right, and I now know I'm wrong, but I can't admit that I'm wrong because of all of the consequences of that I've created for myself. I need to just keep, just stacking more cards on top of it. And then you go and start a company while you're lying, and that's the internal matrix of your inner world. Oh boy, are you setting yourself up and your company for a ugly experience?
Absolutely.
Even if you make millions of dollars, you're going to be miserable doing it.
Sadly, that is very true. How do you, from your point of view, from what you're seeing, not just in your own business, not just with 15.5, but just, I know that you interact with a lot of other companies, you as in your organization and yourself. How do you believe COVID is accelerating positive trends in business? What are you seeing there?
Yeah. I think it's a lot. I do think COVID is a great accelerator.
Yeah.
It's like a brick on the pedal. So positive trends from COVID. Mm-hmm. I think that companies starting to pay attention to the emotional and mental well-being of their people is an extremely positive, almost forcing function of COVID and of realizing the crisis that so many people are going through as they move into isolation and life disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's that disorienting dilemma that I talked about earlier that is forcing companies to say, hey, we need to care about the whole human being, and we need to start checking in on people. And how are we feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Not just the left brain analytical stuff, but the actual right brain feeling experience of being human. And so that is happening. And there's so many interesting programs. I mean, the number of like mental health initiatives that we've rolled out, we're rolling out a bunch of stuff in October. That's going to be exciting. And, we've been talking to the CHRO of Twitter, CHRO of Okta, all these big companies that are prioritizing the mental and emotional well-being of their people like never before.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the move to letting people work where they want to work and realizing that, hey, we can function as a remote company. And yeah, like maybe that's not what we do 100%, but nothing fell apart. People actually remained productive, if not more productive, working from home.
Well, we know the results are in that people are actually more productive
Yeah.
from home. But the other side of that, and I've been talking a lot about this in my work, the other side of that is PTSD that people are not considering yet. And it's good to hear that Twitter and places like that are doing that, because this week alone, I've actually started an outline for a video on it. This week alone, I've spoken to 3 high-level CEOs who said, I'm so, like, I've never felt so stressed in my life. I'm feeling kind of nauseous. And, they're talking about all these symptoms, and they go, but when COVID hit and all those things, I was fine. And I go, yeah, you are a prime target for PTSD. And they go, what do you mean? I go, what does PTSD stand for? And they say, post. I know I'm one, means, oh, shit's hitting the fan. Let's get in there. We just get shit done.
Yeah.
But the moment your brain goes, oh, I'm not under threat anymore, then all the feelings come back, and your top performers in the chaos, and now the people now the chaos is easy enough, and we've gotten a little bit used to this, those are all the people who are now falling apart. And if you don't have a system to take care of those people, You're going to lose so many of your good people. So many. And so this is really good to hear that these people, these companies are looking and saying, we got to look up. I mean, this is the work that we do, is like, how do you take care of these people moving forward? It's vital.
Well, and I mean, this is so interesting. And this is such a large conversation, right? Because fundamentally we need wide scale trauma healing for humanity.
Yes.
Like we're a traumatized species.
Yep.
Epigenetics demonstrates and proves the trauma from up to 7 and now even 14 generations back is still detectable in our bodies.
Yep.
And so it's like, whoa, okay, because we've been through some dark things as a species. We've done really bad things. We've, just go back a few generations and we've all committed and been committed some atrocities in our bloodlines. And then you don't even need to go back a generation. We all are going through traumatic experiences. And so can we get good at, like dogs, like shaking it out, actually getting the trauma out of the nervous system and engaging in and leaning towards trauma therapy as a culturally accepted norm. I mean, and I don't think any company is doing this really well yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're taking some of the beginning steps at providing this as a resource, but that is, I think, where we need to head. And in the meantime, as individuals, I think we should be pursuing it on our own. I mean, I'm even thinking, wow, yeah, I kind of thrived in COVID. It was like, okay, I just came back from paternity leave and it was like, zoom, boom.
Yep.
And there was this high level of purpose, and it was stressful, but it felt just like, okay, one battle, what's the next one tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And I just moved, at the beginning, before we started recording, I was just sharing, I just moved from 14 years in California back to the Rockies in Western Colorado and living with my family and raising my daughter here. But I'm like 8 days in, and I've been having a lot of feelings, and I'm like, oh, I think it's slowing down enough that all the gunk is having a moment to come up.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful because I have resources I know I can go to help clean the pipes.
And that's why, when I started, when COVID kicked in, I got in touch I reached out immediately to many of the leaders I work with, and I said, here's what you need to know. And they go, what? I said, you're immediately going to start thinking about making cutbacks. And on those cutbacks are going to be people like me. Not necessarily me, but people like me. Don't do it. You need us more than ever. And they go, why? Number one, you are going to have to tap into your humanity as a leader, and it's going to come out of the theoretical into the practical very quickly, which they saw. I said, so you got to know how to pivot and create agility and resilience in this time. Okay, great. Then I came back to them in June and I said, now you got to understand that when things start leveling out, you are going to need me personally. And I know you take care of other people. This is what you do. But you now need me because of what you do, because now you're going to start hitting that wall, because you're going to go, oh, I can breathe. And the minute you breathe, everything is going to come back that you've repressed in order to get shit done. And you got it done, and you were magnificent, and I applaud it, and you've taken care of your people, and it's been fabulous. But now you need that resource of somebody who can hear something that you can't tell anybody else, that you can't even tell yourself yet, that I have the ability to see. And it's people who are those top pinnacle people who go, well, I should be able to handle it. And we are at the highest level of danger because we run at the highest level of, the stress. And then that moment of tuning down, like you said, that 8 days in the Colorado mountains, you're like, what's going on? This should be easy. What's going on? Yeah, I had this conversation with a high-level CEO in one of the multinational accounting firms who is a client of mine, and she says, what the hell's going on? And I said, I've had this conversation 3 times this week with 3 of my leaders. And she's, really? And I go, word for word. This is why we have to build cultures that are human-based. And that's why I love what you're doing.
Yeah.
I love that.
It is more effort.
It is.
Like when COVID hit, we ran the numbers and we looked at all of the different scenarios, and we knew we needed to cut payroll by 30%.
Mm-hmm.
Like the viability of the life of the company is priority.
Yep.
And we need to cut 30% of payroll along with everything else that we cut. We decided, rather than lay off 30%, we were going to do collective pay cuts.
Right.
Everybody in the company bled a little, so we didn't do layoffs. And we knew it was going to be for probably about 6 months. That we rallied as a company and we performed, and we were able to revert the salary cuts 4 months earlier than anticipated. And we just paid everybody back the 2 months of cuts. And we didn't lay off a single person.
That's awesome.
And we have so much pride.
Coming at it from humanity.
Yeah. And it was interesting because even like we were looking at everything, and we were looking at the spreadsheet of all of the salaries and numbers. And it's so easy to turn a human being into an abstract number on a spreadsheet and say, okay, this is boom, boom, boom. Okay, we did 30%. And my CEO, bless his heart, he repeatedly said, I do not want us to abstract these people into numbers. We need to remember they're human beings going through this with us. And so if we make the decision, if we go with a layoff, we need to read their names as we're doing it, not just a number. And thankfully, we were able to avoid a layoff. But we do. It's like, are you willing to feel the pain and be connected to the humanity, even if you have to do something like that? Let us feel the pain of that decision and not just numb ourselves from it.
You know, I love that analogy, that reality rather, Shane, because it brings up an analogy that, you know, we've all seen in a movie, and it's where somebody works for one of the three-letter agencies, you know, or even a police force or whatever it is, and they're devastated by the fact that they shot someone, and they're talking to some senior person who has shot multiple people, and says, "Do you ever get over it?" And the other person, who is, you know, who is a humanitarian at base, who says, "The moment you stop feeling it is the moment you need to quit."
Yeah.
And it's that, you know, because essentially a layoff is a shooting. You are shooting this person in their esteem. You're shooting this person in their sense of value. You're shooting this person in the sense of their own value in the world, even, and their identity. And you've got to, and I love that you didn't say, well, no, this is this is a name or a number, but this is a human, is so vitally important.
Yeah.
Who is a company, you know, maybe it's a company you're working with, but maybe it's a company that you're aware of, who is really doing what 15.5 set up to do or to assist? Who's a company who's doing that really well that you would call out and go, you know, I really would applaud that organization?
Yeah. You know, I recently learned a little bit more about WD-40, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the company that makes oil in a can.
Yeah.
And I never would have thought that they'd be on the cutting edge of a more human-based leadership. But they really are. I forget the CEO's name, but they've done some incredible things that really match up with what we call as best self-management, you know, managing people in a way that they become their best selves. And I've been really impressed with everything I've learned about what they're doing. Even though they might have like some old school software and technology stacks, but the primacy of humanity and creating a culture of kindness and belonging was really quite impressive. Let's see, other examples. I mean, I think that it's hard to know from the news, right? But I think that companies that are saying, "Hey, we're going to pivot and we're going to go fully remote for forever. If you want to work remotely," because what I think that giving people freedom and flexibility is actually treating people as adults,
Mm-hmm.
and it's saying we trust your intrinsic motivators. If you live where you want to live because it's closer to family, it allows you to live your best life, that's a good thing for us as a company.
Mm-hmm.
And I applaud every company out there that's learning to embrace the intrinsic motivation of the human beings that work with them. And then you combine that with a curiosity platform where it is on a continually leaning into what is really going on and how can we really help and what do you really want in life and how do you want to grow and who do you want to become and what's your ideal career and what are your strengths and how can we leverage those strengths more? Then I think you're off to the races and building a company that can achieve incredible things while also truly enlivening and energizing the human beings that work for you.
Yeah, I think that as you and I had talked about in our previous conversation, that one of the things I think COVID has done is it's pushed us into a future we were resistant of, and that you know, companies who said, you know, we're too big a ship, we can't go remote in, you know, without giving us 3 or 4 years to do it, had to do it in 21 days and did it. Or else they would have gone out of business, and they did it. And I remember talking about this 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago and saying, you got to give people permission to work from home. If they have a decent internet connection, that they can do it. And you go, well, how can we trust that they do? And it's just stop paying people on hours.
Yeah.
And start paying people on production. The paying people on hours is a stupid system anyway. It belongs to an industrial age that's got nothing to do with anything today. And then treat your people as humans. I love that you are doing that. I love that your company is doing that. And I love that your company is not only doing it, but facilitating other companies in doing it. This time has flown by. I've loved our conversation. Thank you so much, Shane, for taking the time to have this conversation. There's two things I want to finish with. First of all, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to tell our listeners and our viewers where they can find out more about you, about your organization, about all your resources. But first, I want to ask you to give our listeners, our viewers, something practical they can go away and do, preferably immediately, but certainly within the next 24 to 48 hours, to make them a better leader, to make their companies better. What would that be?
Yeah, I'll just do a plug for my platform, because I actually believe this is a really easy thing for you to do. Is go to 15five.com. It's 15five.com, and sign up for our free access. And that'll give you access to our check-in. And that'll allow you to have curiosity-based conversations on a weekly basis. Because then what's really cool is you send it to your team, they answer a couple of questions, and you use that as your template for your one-on-one. You sit down with them, and instead of 30 minutes of check-ins, you immediately can say, oh, wow, tell me more about this. Let's talk about this. This seems really important. And it immediately up-levels the conversation, because it's all about what's the quality of conversation you're having in your company. And so that, I think, is one of the easiest ways to do it. And then the second one would be do your own version of Question Friday. Just get on a call, ask a question. Everybody goes around. You'll be amazed at how much more connected and open-hearted you actually feel at the end of that.
Yeah, I fully agree. Fully agree. Love it. Thank you. Please tell everybody where they can find out about you, Shane, about your company, about all the resources that people can tap into.
Okay, so follow me on LinkedIn, Shane Metcalf on LinkedIn. That's an easy one. I try to be consistent with my postings, and I go up and down, but I'm generally pretty good about that. I follow our own podcast, the Best Self-Management Podcast. And that's me and my co-founder, David Hassel. And we're jamming on a lot of these topics. We're really exploring how do we help, we interview chief people officers from some of the best companies in the world, some of the thought leaders and authors about how do you build cultures that bring out the best in people. And so that's a really fun resource. And then get on our mailing list, 15five.com, sign up for our newsletter. We're always doing events. We're bringing in speakers. We're really trying to have the backs of HR and people ops to help you build extraordinary companies in partnership with the C-suite.
Fabulous. Well, it has been a pleasure and an honor, sir. Thank you so much. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. It has been a joy. And again, I encourage you, dear listener, to make sure that you do follow up with this. As we always say, information is worth the hole in the donut. Transformation comes from application. So put what you've learned today in action. Remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode that you've been listening to or any past episodes inside of our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Just look for the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. Because it doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for you or for your organization, go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. And remember that you can reach your next evolution of leadership by going to the Dragon's Lair. You can find out about that on dovbaron.com, or you can go to patreon.com/dovbaron. Because unified meaning, or as we call it, finding your dragonfire, is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can have deeper, more meaningful conversations as the foundation for building a rock-solid culture in any environment, including one where everything is burned up and you get to evolve into a dragon. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your dragon fire to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.